Welcome to the Miller Report, Real Clear Journalism. I'm Maggie Miller. A new Real Clear Investigations piece based on a report published by the Civitas Institute is taking a close look at a shift shaping America's future, the rise of Latino America. Latinos are now one of the fastest growing and most influential communities in the country. They've grown from just 5% of the population in 1970 to about 20% today, and are driving more than half of all U.S. population growth. By 2060, they're expected to drive nearly all of it. The investigation shows this surge isn't just about numbers. It's also about economic power. The U.S. Latino GDP is estimated at $3.7 trillion. Latino workers also have one of the highest labor force participation rates in the country, playing critical roles in construction, manufacturing, logistics, and other sectors. Latino communities are growing well beyond traditional hubs in the Southwest, now expanding to the Midwest, the Southeast, and smaller cities looking for workers and fresh economic energy. But the report also points to challenges: high housing costs, strict land use rules, and some climate and transportation policies that drive up costs for working class families. Education gains have been substantial, with Latino college enrollment surging, but degree completion still lags behind other groups. Despite these hurdles, the investigation finds Latinos remain among the most optimistic communities in America. Optimism that remains despite concerns surrounding ICE. Latinos maintain strong values around family, faith, work, and patriotism, and they're a growing political force, no longer a reliable voting bloc for either party. We're joined now by two of the authors of the report, Joel Kotkin and Jennifer Hernandez, to discuss what this all means. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So, can you start by telling me what the impetus behind conducting this study was?
Well, I guess because I'm at Civitas, so that maybe I should answer that. Basically, Jennifer and I had done a lot of work on California, and making the point that there really have been very few dispassionate studies of Latinos, either in California, and now what we want to do it nationally, because I don't think people really understand what's exactly going on and a lot of the nuances. And we also did something I thought that was really important, which is we did a very, very detailed national survey of Latino attitudes. And I think that, basically we have to understand that this is really the future of the United States. And if Latinos do well, the U.S. does well. If they don't, we're in trouble.
Jennifer, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I have had the privilege of working with Joel on a number of projects now, and really starting about 15 years ago, my practice, which is about getting permits to build stuff in California, whether it's housing or infrastructure or anything else, ground to a near halt over the state's opposition to building anything. And it's many, many points of veto. And what was really the main target of these challenges was housing, especially housing that could be afforded by normal working people who wanted to just buy a house and have that piece of the American dream. So I started doing civil rights advocacy work on behalf of civil rights leaders engaged in a home ownership project. And it was a stunning, to me, display of the disconnect between policymakers who purported to be progressive and sympathetic with, disadvantaged communities and whatnot, and their absolute delight in killing permanently any attainable home ownership for California's working people, majority of whom now are no longer white, and the biggest, within that that population is Latino. So it was just an incredible betrayal to see California policymakers viciously undermine attainable home ownership for Latino communities, and with really just incredible contempt for the American and California dream. And that's continued.
So with the growth of the Latino population in America, it's obviously important to understand what drives them, what motivates Latino America. What were your findings with regards to that?
Well, we could talk mainly. One of the things we found in the survey and from other surveys as well. Very much oriented towards work, family, hopefully buying a house, upward mobility. The vast majority of Latinos are also very much motivated by a sense of patriotism, the very high degree of Latinos compared to other groups in terms of the military, in terms of the police force. I really think that these are, in many ways, classical American immigrants in the best sense, which is they want to come here because they want to make their lives better. And once they're here, many, I would say most, want to be middle class Americans. That's their goal. The problem, of course, is there are parts of the country where, as Jennifer points out, like California, where it's become very difficult. But there are other parts of the country where Latinos are going where they can fulfill that dream.
Jennifer?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think what's clear, and it wasn't exactly a mystery or a surprise, is Latino aspirations are American aspirations. There's really no distance. You can, get to slight differences in workforce participation or, desire for home ownership or whatever. And in those cases where there are differences, Latinos are even more affirmatively seeking that American dream. Work hard, got it. Raise the family, got it. Get the kids educated and on an upward mobile track, got it. Own a home and a car, got it. There's no mystery here. What's a mystery is how it became politically possible to attack these values with such vehemence, and that's what's happening in California.
And let's just speak about the politics of it all. Obviously, with Latino America's growth, it's been something that's been discussed from the right, from the left. Everyone's looking to see how they can shore up votes, right? So what does Latino priorities and spread? Obviously, you said it's not just a Southwest. They're not just staying in the Southwest anymore. They're moving across the country. What does that mean for politics?
And this initially, what our findings were that Latinos were generally slightly left of center on most issues, but not nearly as far left as our overeducated, underpaid people who in the sort of Gen Z left. They're quite a bit more conservative than that. I think that they were headed towards really dividing themselves between the two parties. President Trump did it remarkably well among Latinos, particularly in states like Texas and Florida, than any Republican in recent history. So, but I do think, and be interested to see what Jennifer has to say, I find, and we found in our focus groups, support for closing the border or securing the border, support for getting rid of the criminals. I don't think there's a lot of support among Latinos and frankly among most Americans for kind of, going to and throwing out somebody who has been living in the neighborhood for 30 years, owns a business, everybody knows them, they've never committed a crime. I don't think that's very popular. And we found even among very conservative Latinos, a lot of resentment about that. And I think that's a real danger the Republicans have put themselves in.
Yeah, I'll just add maybe two things is one, a really, really high vulnerability to increases in everyday and non-negotiable costs. The cost of gasoline, electricity, food. If you're living based on your paycheck and those costs go up, you feel it. You feel it at home. You feel it in whatever you're trying to do by way of savings or upward mobility. And so there was a cost sensitivity that I think the Biden administration was particularly, and then Kamala too, deaf to. And then secondly, there really is this kind of disregard for what during COVID we called essential workers in public policy, people who actually make stuff, repair stuff, build stuff, produce stuff. They don't need fancy and expensive college degrees, but they do need to show up on time at work and do a very important job every day. And we cheered them during COVID. And as soon as COVID ended, we're like, yeah, we don't care that we're throwing a whole bunch of people out of jobs because, we need to save whatever we need to save today. Today we're going to save the planet. Tomorrow we're going to save an insect. The next day we're going to save, our sense of social order, where it's more important to create kind of a welfare economy, frankly, and hand out checks and redistribute checks, including picking your pocket to give to someone even less fortunate, even though you can't make ends meet either. And that goes to medical care and everything, everything else that everyday people have to pay for. There just was this affordability tone deafness by the Democrats during the election, and people are tired of it. It's been a generation or more of loss of income and status, and frankly more pain with a bunch of empty promises.
It seems like the barriers that were highlighted throughout your piece don't seem to be Latino specific, but just barriers that anybody who's looking to achieve the American dream would want to see done away with. Was that part of, the point that you guys were trying to make, that yes, Latino growth is American growth because we're seeing it in such big numbers, but it's important to understand that, their dreams are the same as many other working class Americans, and their barriers are the same as well.
Well, I think that we didn't start with that necessarily as our conclusion, but we went and did a survey and we asked people, and then obviously we looked at other surveys, and obviously Jennifer and I as well have day-to-day contact with Latinos all the time. So, you kind of figured this stuff out. I mean, one of the most interesting parts of the research that was done by the University of Texas people, and I thought it was just really fascinating, when they asked Latinos, what do you care about in where you live? And they said security, safety, affordability. At the bottom of the list was living near people like you. They really didn't care if they had Latino neighbors or not. Their biggest priority were the exact same priority that the vast majority of Americans would tell you. We just thought the congruence between most Americans' views and Latinos' views to be rather astounding.
And I also brought to the table my work with civil rights leaders who had long criticized California media, for example, in quoting Latinos only on issues like immigration or gangs or, quote, affordable housing, which is an Orwellian term that in California means income restricted households. God forbid you make $3 more next year. Now you lose your housing, is the way that affordable housing, capital A, works in California. And they were very irritated, civil rights leaders, that what they were shooting for, which was kind of equity, including access to home ownership, was being so completely disregarded by these kind of media themes. And then, of course, throwing further fire onto the fire is the fact that civil rights became a word that we no longer use. Instead, we use the term environmental justice, but environmental justice is just one slice of a civil rights pie that includes home ownership and education and medical care and everything else. And the media started focusing just on EJ, and EJ is pretty closely aligned in California with the left or socialist agenda. And it disregarded the values and aspirations of the Latino civil rights leadership. So it's been a very forceful lesson, this survey, as to how, big surprise, we all know Latinos hardworking, seeking the American dream, and why not, right? Why draw up the drawbridge today and keep that population from upward mobility. That's where we're going to draw the line. That's not okay.
And your report calls Latinos a strategic asset for America. What specific steps should policymakers be making to tap into that potential, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I really think we need to be ruthlessly cutting costs. You can build 4 apartments in Dallas for the price of building 1 affordable income-restricted apartment in Los Angeles. And that's because California has gotten utterly unconstrained with the piling on of costs of living here. And it really is true. You know, a median income worker in California is far, far poorer because of our cost of living than a median income worker in Mississippi. We have the highest poverty rate. And the solution is what? Income redistribution from the billionaires? No, a large part of it, frankly, is just bringing prices down to the levels that they're at the rest of the country, whether it's housing or energy or food or anything else. So relentless focus on cost reduction, and then a re-endorsement of the right, the civil right of Latinos to pursue and achieve the American dream. Let's not pretend that, you know, drawing up the drawbridge right today for this population is in any way consistent with American values. And so that means recreating homeownership opportunity. And it frankly means running away and rejecting the whole idea of kind of degrowth. Let's reduce population. Let's reduce jobs. Let's reduce how many miles we drive. Let's reduce everything. We need to move from the politics of scarcity, which very much dominates the California left, into a politics that actually provides access, equal access, if not abundant access. So those are policy prescriptions writ large.
And just on the strategic issue, just because I want to answer that part of the question, the big advantage is we have unlike many of our competitor countries, because of immigration and because of a somewhat higher birth rate among Latinos, we are not going to face the kind of absolutely catastrophic labor shortages that are, likely in some other countries. And we have to understand that the nature of the Latino immigration, I think our economy is becoming more and more attuned to what you might call actual tangible products. I think that if we start building homes, if we start building factories, if we reindustrialize, it's going to be predominantly in most parts of the country the Latinos who do the work. And I also think we have the advantage, which is Latinos come to America coming from a culture that has many things in common with our culture, of the American culture, religiously, in terms of family. There might be a few lunatics who want to have Mexico retake what it lost in 1848. But in reality, I think we have a population that really wants to be American. It's not the situation that you have, unfortunately, in Europe, where you have large immigrant populations who are kind of not with the program in terms of liberal values, in terms of religious tolerance. So I think that this is an enormous strategic advantage the United States has. How we react and work with our Latino population is going to have as much to do with the future of the United States as any single thing.
And what would you say to people who hear statistics like that were written in your piece saying that Latinos are driving more than half of all U.S. population growth by 2060? They're expected to drive nearly all of it, and might find concern with something like that. What would you say to them?
Well, for one thing, I think babies are fun. And I think kids are fun until they're teenagers. Then they get fun again. So I don't know why it became so dominant that people are having fewer kids. But one reason is cost. It's too darn expensive. We need to get back to cost. And a real simple example is, again, California, if you want to build a house, that house is going to be burdened with the cost of expanding a freeway and building a new sewer plant, all kinds of other stuff, which frankly, our parents, certainly our grandparents, they could never have afforded a house with those kinds of add-ons. And those are all just based on policy choices made that, we spend a lot more than we collect in taxes, and we frankly spend it on folks who have college degrees and spend time on the keyboard and in meetings, and disregard the fact that we have to have food and equipment that actually works and products that actually are available to buy. We just need to get a little more respectful of each other. And I do think respect should be mutual, and will lead to more kids, and more kids will lead to more Little League teams, and more Little League teams will lead to more parents who are working together and intermingling, and like my parents, Mexican and Italian, co-married.
There we go. The American dream right there. Would you guys leave me with what the key takeaways you want people to walk away from your investigation having as we're looking ahead to the future of America and the American dream?
Well, I guess I could start and hand it over to Jennifer. But, the main thing is to understand that Latinos, it's not a invasion. I mean, yes, there was a problem with, Biden's idiotic border policies, which allowed, anybody basically into the country. But basically, this is not an invasion. This is part of the American story. And in this era of demographic decline and the need to reindustrialize, Latinos are an enormous advantage and asset to the United States, and we should treat it that way. And that doesn't mean affirmative action or special this, special that. Anything that lifts the American economy, creates more opportunity, will be good both for Latinos and Americans in general.
I would totally endorse that. I think our survey is a story of hope. That really, this is such a wonderful group of people who want nothing more than a fair shake at the American dream. And all we need to do is restore that fair shake to the American dream. That's something we've known how to do for well more than a century. And we can go back to that instead of all this infighting and identitarian politics and redistribution and all the sort of nonsense that comes out of faculty lounges. I'm not a full-time scholar, unlike Joel. People with too much time, or as my dad would say, for being so smart, you sure can be stupid sometimes. And I feel like we need to turn the page on the stupid. Good news, California has now legalized the teaching of phonics again, so maybe we can read. But right now we have the lowest third grade reading scores in the country because we went off on a faculty lounge pipe dream. And we need to just cut that out. Let's talk to each other and restore access. Hard workers deserve a shot at home ownership.
Well, Joel, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was it for the Miller Report, Real Clear Journalism. I'm Maggie Miller. I'll see you next time.